Bonjour à l'estimée délégation du Botswana. Nous allons commencer cet exercice en vous donnant la parole pour des échanges, en tout cas des réponses. Nous allons accueillir vos réponses jusqu'à 11h15. À 11h15, nous aurons la pause café, mais retenez que vous avez 1h45. Je pense que c'est largement suffisant pour que vous puissiez nous apporter les réponses attendues. Vous avez, sans plus tarder, vous avez la parole.
Good morning, Honorable Chairperson and Commissioners. Once again, thank you for the opportunity granted to us to respond to the issues raised earlier in the week. In the event the Commission feels we need to substantiate any information or responses, we will gladly forward to the Commission detailed reports, including any statistical information you shall so require. Without much ado, Madam Chairperson, we would deal with these responses in accordance with the issues raised by the respective commissioners for ease of reference. On the general comments, Madam Chair, an issue was raised about Botswana, the track record of implementing provisional measures by Botswana is not so good. Responses are given, such as communication and related, that measures that Botswana has put in place to ensure the engagement of the Commission on a regular basis. Madam Chair, Botswana has an interministerial committee that clears treaties, conventions, and covenants for cabinet consideration and other national structures. The structure also monitors and does follow-up on implementation of international obligations, including submission of periodic reports and recommendations. In addition, as we said earlier, the Human Rights Unit is being established in the Office of the President, which will draw up an action plan that will include this particular subject matter of submission of reports and recommendations to and from international organizations. Madam Chair, the second aspect, it relates to the matter of default position by Botswana in not rectifying conventions. The belief is that we don't, we are not implementing or ratifying because we are already doing something. And the question is, if we do, why don't we ratify and be bound to the obligations? Madam Chair, while Botswana acknowledges that she does not or has not ratified or signed certain conventions, she remains committed, and this is demonstrated by her resolve to establish a human rights coordinating unit under the Office of the President. Like I said, this will will complement existing structures, such as the Interministerial Committee on Conventions, Treaties, and Protocols, to advise government on her reporting obligations, including ratification or accession to the key international instruments. Botswana will consider ratification or accession to international treaties after following the due process as provided for in terms of the laws of Botswana and after thorough consultations. On the issue of declaration of assets and liabilities bill, the draft bill awaits cabinet consideration. We certainly are keen to present this through to Parliament at the earliest opportunity. Commissioner Yuan, thank you. On older persons. He raised the issue, do older persons in Botswana enjoy non-contributory pension? Yes, every person over the age of 65 is eligible to receive non-contributory pension. Furthermore, widows of World War II military veterans receive a cash allowance on a monthly basis. Is the provision made for old age homes or initiated programs to maintain and integrate older persons? It is covered in our response to the advanced questions that we have, answers that we had forwarded to the Commission. Is legal aid available to older persons? Legal Aid Botswana is now fully operational, Madam Chair, and provides legal assistance to indigent persons in Botswana. Legal aid is mandated to assist indigent persons to access legal representation in all civil matters. There is no age prescription set for persons to utilize the services. How is Botswana dealing with the backlog of cases since the inception of the judicial case management system? Madam Chair, a high-level criminal justice forum has been established comprising all key players in the justice system, such as the Administration of Justice, Directorate of Public Prosecutions, Botswana Police Service, Department of Prisons and Rehabilitation, Directorate on Corruption and Economic Crime. The Directorate of Public Prosecutions has established a dedicated backlog case management unit. Botswana has standardized turnaround time for case disposal, which is currently 18 months. The country has also established specialized courts to establish case disposal. For instance, we have in operation small claims courts, traffic offenses courts, stock theft courts, corruption cases courts. This is an ongoing initiative. The other specialized courts, such as commercial courts, are in the process of being established. Madam Chair, the 8th question is, what is the number of persons in detention centers out of those awaiting trial? How many are awaiting trial? And how many are serving sentences? There are 4,132 persons in detention centers, and 1,149 are awaiting trial. What is the jurisdiction of customary courts? Are the officers trained, and do they adhere to principles of natural justice? Do they have an appellate system? Can persons appearing before customary courts have the right to legal representation? Madam Chair, customary courts hear certain cases under their jurisdiction, matters pertaining to customary law, including those under the Penal Code. The decision of the customary courts are appealable to the customary Court of Appeal, and then to the High Court. However, such persons may exercise their constitutional right to have legal representation. In such instances, the matter will be referred to a magistrate court. What we are trying to say here is, where a person has been tried in a customary court and prefers to have legal representation, their case will then be transferred to a magistrate court where legal representation is admissible. Is there corporal punishment in schools? What is the status of the Education and Training Bill? Madam Chair, our answer has been captured in question 66, and the responses have been forwarded to the Commission. Commissioner Asagbo, pardon my pronunciation, Madam. What obstacles are impeding the ratification of the Maputo Protocol, and what steps have been taken? Botswana fully subscribes to the spirit of Maputo Protocol and other instruments that promote gender equality and women's empowerment. Botswana is party to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and has currently prioritized its limited resources to its domestication, whose process is at legislation drafting stage. It is on this basis that Botswana has not yet signed the Maputo Protocol. What standards, declarations, and conventions has Botswana been using to protect the rights of women? Botswana, Madam Chair, is party to, among others, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the African Union Agenda 2063, the Southern African Development Community Protocol on Gender and Development, which will have all informed the national policy on gender and development adopted by government in 2015. Additional frameworks at national level include the National Vision 2036, which recognizes the important role of women and men, girls and boys in achieving social, economic, cultural, and political development, as well as National Development Plan 11, which has prioritized gender mainstreaming and gender-based violence. What is contributing to unsafe abortions in Botswana? The main causes of abortion include unwanted pregnancies, structural determinants which are prevalent among adolescents and young women. Position of child marriage in Botswana, what action has been taken to end child marriages? Madam Chair, in terms of the Marriage Act, a person between the ages of 18 to 21 years may marry with parental consent. Children under the age of 18 cannot get married. However, it is considered that Marriage Act does not govern marriages contracted under customary law nor religious marriages. Commissioner King, socioeconomic and cultural rights and extractive industries. How is Botswana improving mental health care, and what measures have been taken to integrate such patients to the community health care? Through the National Health Policy, the Ministry of Health and Wellness is implementing mental health programs in communities and facilities to support families and individuals. Programs include one-on-one psychological assessments, therapy, and family-level mentorship, as well as rehabilitation interventions in mental health facilities. Clients who need intensive care and prolonged rehabilitation therapy are referred to hospitals for specialized treatment. We have two such facilities, one in the south, one in the north. What is the impact of the introduction of early childhood care and development reception classes in minority communities? Botswana is currently carrying out an evaluation impact study on early childhood development program with UNICEF and a monitoring and evaluation rapid assessment with the World Bank. Is there free basic education? Is it compulsory and enjoyed by all children? Free basic education is provided for. Free education, Madam Chair, is provided for in the revised National Policy on Education of 1994. The Children's Act further entrenches that right. The Children's Act also provides that any person who knowingly prohibits a child from accessing education is guilty of an offense. And of course, such observations are processed through the Social Welfare and Community Development Department to monitor this expectation which is so prescribed by the law. Commissioner Manuela, is there an overpopulation in the female wing in prisons in Botswana? Madam Chair, there are 3 female prisons, namely the Gaborone Women's Prison, with an authorized capacity of 30 prisoners or inmates, Mahalape Prison, with an authorized capacity of 80, and the Francistown Center for Illegal Immigrants with an authorized capacity of 84, bringing the total capacity to 194. Currently, there are 161 inmates, female inmates. Thus, the population capacity is below the authorized capacity by 33%. Therefore, there is no overcrowding in the female prisons. Are inmates on death row entitled to visitation rights? Madam Chair, yes. All prisoners, including those on death row, are entitled to one visit a month by relatives and friends. This excludes their lawyers, who can visit them as frequently as they think is necessary. How are prisoners capacitated in prison? Prisoners are offered various educational programs, both primary, that is elementary education, secondary, and tertiary. And of course, we also provide vocational training programs. In addition to these, character molding programs are offered to those who are in need or those who would prefer such opportunities. Commissioner Sylvie, extrajudicial executions. Provide information concerning extrajudicial killings, use of force, and death in prisons, enforced disappearances by state agents. Madam Chair, we will deal with this question. We would rather defer this particular answer to a later time. International Convention on Forced Disappearances and that on torture, what measures are in place to rectify the same? Would prefer, Madam Chair, to defer this answer to a later time. The legislation in Botswana allows for the use of lethal force in instances where inmates escape. What measures are in place to prevent abuses? Use of force is allowed by the Prisons Act under circumstances such as escape and use of violence against officers or other prisoners. The Act requires that where force has been used, it must be formally reported to the Commissioner of Prisons, who may decide that appropriate action be taken if excessive force has been found to have been used. Have any public debates on death penalty been held? Madam Chair, there has not been in the recent time a debate on death penalty. But of course, as members of Parliament would conduct their public meetings and consultations, the matter often arises where the public still believe that it must be kept and maintained in part in our statutes. Provide the number of death row inmates in Botswana. There are 5 prisoners sentenced to death, out of which 4 are still to appear at the Court of Appeal. All capital punishment sentences automatically reach the Court of Appeal, whether or not the accused person has noted an appeal. In terms of the clemency applications, how many have been positively and negatively responded to? Madam Chair, we will provide an answer at a later time. We defer this answer or the response. Is prior information available to the family members of inmates prior to the execution? The procedure is that family members are informed, and detailed instances could be provided as part of our deferred responses. Do death row inmates receive psychosocial consultation prior to sentencing? In the state of mind, is the state of mind taken into consideration at the time of sentencing? Madam Chair, this is true, yes. Death raw inmates receives psychosocial consultation prior to sentencing. If the state of mind is seen to have been impaired, that amounts to extenuating circumstances. And it is very common that persons would be sent for evaluation at an appropriate facility. Which instruments have been ratified by Botswana dealing with internally displaced persons? Madam Chair, none. The only legislation in use is the Immigration Act as stated in the responses to the advanced question number 51. And Madam Chair, I must note that in terms of our own circumstances, we do not have internally displaced persons unless in events of disaster or misfortunes. But otherwise, we do not have such occurrences. There are this is Commissioner Lumbu, Human Rights Defenders. How many human rights defenders are there in Botswana? There are a number of, Madam Chair, a number of human rights defenders in Botswana. For instance, Childline, the Swanelo, the Center of Human Rights, Botswana Watch, Human Rights Watch, Tusano Lefatsim, the Lesbian, Gays, and Bisexuals of Botswana, Legabibo, Botswana Society for the Deaf, Botswana Network of People Living with AIDS, Bonepa, Botswana Educational Research Association, BERA, Society of Road Safety Ambassadors, Skills Share International Botswana. Non-governmental organizations include the NGO Council, Kwendo, Food Bank Botswana Trust. What are the legislative and institutional measures to protect the rights of human rights defenders in Botswana? Besides the Bill of Rights, Madam Chair, as captured in the Constitution, there is no specific legislation or mechanism in place for human rights defenders. That notwithstanding, the Whistleblowing Act prohibits the disclosure of the identity of whistleblowers and imposes stiff penalties for such disclosures. Concerning the guidelines on the freedom of association by the African Union, to what extent has Botswana implemented these? Madam Chair, we will defer the response to a later time. Is Botswana aware of the AU model law on human rights defenders? And if so, how does Botswana intend to domesticate it? Madam Chair, we would defer this response. Commissioner Maiga on HIV/AIDS. What laws are there to prohibit discrimination and stigma against persons affected by HIV/AIDS as regards to access to employment? Madam Chair, we refer to the response given to question 64 and paragraph 66 of our statement relating to access to HIV services to specific population groups such as children, adolescents, young women, and special groups, as well as responses that cover stigma and discrimination. Botswana National Policy on HIV/AIDS, as revised in 2013, provides access to HIV treatment to everybody and free treatment to Botswana citizens. With regards to stigma in employment, the Employment Act, the Public Service Act, and the general orders provide statutory measures for hiring employees in the public and private institutions. Measures to protect the rights of employees are enshrined in these laws. As such, sufficient safeguards are provided therein. Do HIV-positive workers have access to legal aid? Provide statistics of such if available. Like I said, Madam Chair, Legal Aid Botswana is now fully operational with a reasonable representation in the country and plans to expand its reach, that is opening offices, additional offices across the country. It provides legal assistance to every indigent person in Botswana. Legal Aid Botswana is mandated to assist indigent persons to access legal representation in all civil matters and for criminal cases only on appeal on a case-by-case basis. What measures do Botswana have to close to 85% ARV treatment coverage? Botswana, Madam Chair, is a signatory to the UN 2020 targets of 90-90-90, and the goal of ending HIV/AIDS by 2030. Botswana has attained 86% of the treatment target as of July 2018, which is the second of the 90 UNAIDS. This level has been achieved by very few countries globally, which are close to epidemiological control as expressed in the July 2018 UNAIDS report of miles to go. Currently, there are no clients on the waiting list, and all the 567 health facilities are dispensing antiretroviral medicines across Botswana. Strategies to close the remaining gap include expanding treatment coverage through the Treat All program to hard-to-reach areas, key populations, as well as to adolescent and young women. Community-based programs such as Catch Communities Acting Together to Control HIV and others are being implemented to mobilize households and individuals for linkage to care. Women who have a high prevalence of HIV and AIDS compared to men, what support is given to women, and are there specific socioeconomic programs? Botswana has established linkages between poverty, HIV, drugs and substance abuse, and gender-based violence. To this end, government adopted the Women's Economic Empowerment Program, where women are supported with grants to start income-generating activities with the intention to empower them economically, thereby reducing their vulnerability to gender-based violence as a result of economic dependence on their male counterparts. What has been done for youth to ensure that efforts are in place for their protection in collaboration with Youth Council? The government has mainstreamed youth and development programs that are specifically targeting youth. These cut across various spectrum, such as health, where youth-friendly services are provided, and the Youth Development Fund, where young people are provided with partial funding to start businesses. To further strengthen efforts towards youth empowerment, the Ministry of Youth Empowerment, Sport and Culture has established youth focal persons in all ministries and in all districts to facilitate effective implementation of youth-targeted programs. In addition, government collaborates with civil society organizations in undertaking youth empowerment programs at a community level. Basarwa populations have a higher maternal mortality rate, TB prevalence, and GBV. What is being done to redress these? Botswana's reporting system, Madam Chair, and tools do not disaggregate by ethnic groupings. Hence, information specific to Basarwa on MMR and TB prevalence cannot be deduced. With regards to gender-based violence, Botswana, following the 2012 GBV indicator study, which revealed a prevalence of 67%, developed the national strategy on ending gender-based violence, that is between the period 2014 to 2020. Engaged with community leaders, including those in the Basarwa areas. A capacity building workshop was held in 2013 in Khansi, where the Basarwa communities were represented. Dialogue and capacity building with Khansi community, which includes Basarwa, continues to to date through the men's sector and women's sector. To further strengthen interventions to address gender-based violence, the quasi, these are chiefs, including those of Basaro areas, developed an action plan in 2015, which was reviewed in August of 2018. To upscale efforts to address gender-based violence, government currently concluded a gender-based violence study, which included men and boys, and its findings will inform the interventions by a locality. What is Botswana doing in terms of judicial and political representation of Basara communities? Madam Chair, this answer is being deferred. Are minority groups entitled to clean drinking water? Madam Chair, the government of Botswana has committed itself to providing basic amenities such as clean drinking water to all peoples of Botswana, irrespective of ethnicity. Commissioner Mute, access to information. Has Botswana carried out an audit of its laws which undermine the right to access information? Madam Chair, while we defer this answer broadly, I want to confirm that Freedom of Information Act is prioritized, and we consider presenting it to Parliament by July session of 2019. What is the current status of the Media Practitioners Bill? The Media Practitioners Bill, Madam Chair, was passed but has not been assented to. We work on a collaborative arrangement with the media. Does Botswana intend to enact legislation on the freedom of the media, which is currently subsumed under the freedom of expression guarantee? This, Madam Chair, is still under consideration and further discussion. What is Botswana doing to ensure that all its communities communicate in their local languages? Madam Chair, on this particular subject matter, each community freely expresses and uses their language at community levels. But for purposes of government, English and Setswana are the languages of use. A few years ago, there was a move to establish a Botswana Languages Council, and that is still being part of the consideration for the establishment of the Botswana Languages Council, which will also in the main assist and facilitate the promotion of local languages through supporting arrangements where orthographies of the various languages would be part of the processes. What is Botswana doing to ensure it's placing a legislative framework policy that will ensure community broadcasting? Madam Chair, this is still under consideration through the Botswana Communications Regulatory Authority, which processes all applications for broadcasting licenses. Madam Chair, Cybercrime and Computer-Related Act of 2015, what exactly is the context in which prosecutions are instigated, and do we have an effective legislative framework which does not undermine freedom of expression? Offenses under the cybercrime and computer-related offenses, like any other offenses, are intended to apply only where perpetrators choose to overstep their freedoms and their rights, to infringe on the rights and freedoms and privacy of others. The law is not intended to stifle freedom of expression as entrenched in the Constitution of Botswana. What is the current status of the Freedom of Information Bill? Like I said, Madam Chair, we are in the process of finalizing it with a view to presenting it to Parliament by July of 2019. When is the Whistleblowing Act legislated? The Act was enacted in 2016, and the Whistleblowing Act of number 25, the Whistleblowing Act number 9 of 2016 commenced on the 9th December 2016. Madam Chair, this concludes our submission. Thank you.
Merci, honorable chef de délégation de la délégation du Botswana. Nous allons marquer un petit temps pour la pause café et revenir pour donner la parole au rapporteur, commissaire rapporteur du Botswana pour ses remarques en termes de conclusion. Sinon, nous vous remercions déjà pour la qualité des réponses, pour leur clarté, et nous revenons tout à l'heure à 11h30. Merci.
Honorable Minister, I thank you and your delegation for the responses which you have given to us this morning. Your responses were very clear, very concise. In fact, at some point, I realized that you were going to take far lesser time than we had allocated you. And that was very good, so we really do appreciate that. We also take note of the fact that you have very clearly pointed out areas in which you're going to furnish us with more information. So we take due note of that. Our request in respect of information which you're going to furnish us perhaps when you get back to the capital is that hopefully you'll do it sooner rather than later. Perhaps at most in a couple of weeks, so that we'll then be able to finalize our concluding observations. But the fact that you've identified those areas so clearly, I think means that you will be able to provide us with that information. Perhaps I should just point out that since you also identified the colleagues whose questions you are answering, I noted, unless I am mistaken, I noted that you may not have answered the questions around torture, which were raised by Commissioner Hatem. So again, I hope that then that would be one of the areas in which you'd then be able to provide your responses in due course. Then the other point I wish to make is I take note, and we take note of Botswana's commitment to on an ongoing basis consider ratification of relevant human rights treaties. That I think is extremely important, and for at least two reasons, at least in my mind. The importance of Botswana playing a critical human rights role at the regional level cannot really be understated, because your country is one of those which has always been extremely clear. It has been very candid around its diplomatic engagements on the continent. Botswana has always spoken its mind around critical issues which affect Africans and Africa. And so that's why we do rely also on Botswana to take leadership roles on human rights issues and on human rights questions. And that's why we look forward to that. And then again, the other point which I would wish to make there is that sometimes it is easy to want to focus on development frameworks. Development frameworks. I think my message is that human rights frameworks can be as important, if not more important, than development frameworks, and that in any case, a lot of the time, the two really become one. And so that's why it's important that we get all those frameworks happening for the people of Botswana at the same time. In that sense also, I invite Botswana perhaps to host a future session, ordinary session, of the African Commission on Human People's Rights. I think it's time we went back to Southern Africa. I know you have excellent competitors, including Lesotho, who have offered to host a future session of the Commission. I hope that you can also, at some point, hopefully sooner rather than later, offer to host a session of the Commission. I think a couple of points before I conclude, Chair, which is this, that the importance of the questions which various colleagues have asked is in respect of the fact that we are looking to make substantive recommendations, which then, as a state, you're able to take up and hopefully implement. And so, for example, in your response today, Minister, on the question of the Marriage Act, I noted the point which you made about the ages by which or when a person may marry, either with permission or without permission. But you also made the point that actually the Marriage Act does not oversee customary or religious marriages, which therefore means that clearly that's an issue which is in play. In terms then of what sort of engagement would the Women's Rights Rapporteur wish to have with yourselves in respect of that aspect, of that element. And that's why I'm saying that the whole point of this exercise is then to be able to identify and say that, yes, in this regard, there is an issue perhaps on which Botswana and the Commission can have substantive engagements. The idea being not to be critical, not to be overly critical, but rather to begin figuring how do you build on a particular policy area or in a particular rights area. I think the same can be said about the debate on the death penalty. Clearly, as we keep saying, Botswana is a sovereign country. It can make determinations, in this regard. We are glad that Botswana is open to the idea of consultations, public consultations. And I note you say that this may not have happened recently, but that there's always consultations, within and by your members of parliament. I think the key thing is, again, to say it's about leadership. It's about leadership. It's about saying that, the population generally, apparently, seems to be against this, but what is it as the leaders of the country, where do we want to lead our people? And in this regard, the chairperson of the working group on the death penalty offers her support, and she offers the possibility even of engaging with yourselves, being involved in the event that you do hold public consultations. So the final point I wish to make, again, substantively, I thought the idea of Botswana Languages Council was extremely moot, very relevant, and again, it can be framed in a way which is as inclusive as possible to make sure that the people of Botswana are able, as you said yourself, to communicate and to communicate effectively in their local languages. So I think on that basis, we shall then, once we get your further feedback, prepare our concluding observations. We shall also, of course, we have that other track of work which is going on, the preparation of our report from the promotion mission. I should explain, sir, Minister, that I think some of your frustration with you having given us certain answers, I think arises from the fact that for the written questions which you made responses to, I think we received those written responses perhaps 1 or 2 days ago. So possibly that's part of because I noticed that you indicated that you had already made certain of the responses on which questions were then again asked. But then having said that, I trust that you're also going to give to us even the presentation which you've made, and then also as we await your further communications in this regard. So on that basis, I wish to thank you and your delegation, to wish you well as you go back to Botswana, and to look forward to continuing further engagements with the Republic of Botswana. Thank you, Chair.
Est-ce que le chef de la délégation à ce stade voudrait prendre la parole?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner Multi. I just want to assure the Commission of our commitment to the adherence of higher levels of human rights standards. It is our belief that in putting our signature on the dotted line of any treaty or convention, as a state party, we must be ready to comply fully with the requirements of such a convention or instrument. We will endeavor, Madam Chair and Commissioners, to avail ourselves to the Commission to receive further guidance and support as we scale the heights of our international obligations. We are indebted to the commissioners for their indulgence. We will, at the earliest opportunity, respond fully to the deferred responses. And when necessary, like I said earlier, we will also provide statistical information to support the assertions we have made in responding to the questions raised. As a country, we are fully committed to providing our citizens with full human rights to ensure that they enjoy their citizenship. And of course, Botswana is not just made up of citizens. There are those who, for one reason or another, find themselves in Botswana and for the time being are part of our population. We will endeavor to support such persons who had fled their countries. That support that we extend would of course be possible with the support and intervention of partners, development partners, institutions such as yourselves. So as we return home, we will definitely take note of the concerns you've raised and engage our peers in Botswana to ensure that the matters raised are dealt with. In terms of hosting future sessions of the Commission, Madam Chair, I will take this view to the President of the Republic of Botswana and, of course, revert to you for a written request, if you so wish, so that we are able to understand the responsibility, the cost or the implications of hosting such a session, so that if we are to consent to hosting a session, we would be mindful of the costs associated with such a hosting. But otherwise, we are most indebted to you, the commissioners, and to the Secretariat. Thank you very much.
Merci. Nous voici donc au terme de cet exercice. Nous vous réitérons les félicitations et les remerciements de la Commission africaine pour l'intérêt que vous avez porté aux questions qui vous ont été posées et pour la qualité des réponses. Nous souhaitons qu'il y ait une plus forte interaction du Botswana avec les différents mécanismes de la Commission africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Le mécanisme sur les femmes, le mécanisme sur les prisons, sur la peine de mort, mais également sur le mécanisme de la liberté d'expression porté par le commissaire rapporteur. Nous souhaitons également que l'interaction autour des rapports périodiques soit vraiment renforcée, que vous puissiez résorber les retards et que nous puissions également, même en dehors des rapports périodiques, puis être au courant des développements positifs concernant les différents chantiers qui sont ouverts dans le domaine de la promotion et de la protection des droits de l'homme au Botswana. Merci encore une fois et bon retour dans votre pays.